Hey everyone and welcome. It's me, Autumn Keynes from St. Norbert College, and I'm joined by
Joe Murphy at Kenyon College.
we are making a video to welcome everyone to and give a little bit of context around our week around digital identity. And I think one of the first things that we want to do is just go over the agenda for the week. So we've got a couple of different things that you'll be doing this week. We have 2 readings that you're going to be completing. You will be doing a blog post, so you should have access to your blog by now. If not, either contact me or contact Joe, whether you're a cohort from St. Norbert or from Kenyon. We are trying to put together a synchronous call, a video call that we'll all do together, but we're still trying to find a date and a time that will work for everyone. So we have a couple of doodle polls out for that. So please watch the websites for the actual dates, but if you haven't had a chance to fill out the doodle polls, be sure that you do that. And then one of the things that we're going to talk about as part of this call is doing this visitor and resident mapping as a part of a digital identity exercise. But I think Joe and I wanted to get together, talk a little bit about context and what is digital identity and that kind of stuff, just to sort of set the stage. So I think we wanted to start with this visitor and resident mapping. So you're going to do some readings and watch some videos around that, which will show you how to do it. I do think it is a powerful tool in helping us think about our digital identities in terms of context. And the way that it does this, the approach that it takes that I think is so important is really challenging this idea of the digital native. So I think everybody's familiar with this idea of the digital native, but why don't I throw it over to you, Joe? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the digital native and a little bit about why that isn't such a good context for us to be thinking about these things from?
Sure. So this is a concept which I think looking at the readings was starting to pick up around 2004, early, relatively turn of the millennium stuff, that made an argument that young people who are growing up surrounded by technology are somehow, because their experience starts so young and is so interweaved with the rest of their life, technology is not new and difficult for them. And let's just unpack real quickly that word technology, which has gotten conflated with digital. So there's one issue with it. But it's the idea that it's a lot of generational thinking, that obviously these people are very different than those people, and it's essentially a function of age. And I think one of the big problems with that is that it leaves out the way that those differences are based on individual life experience, are based on class, are based on race and gender and other things that have impact on what opportunities you have and what opportunities you take. So I think that that's one of the places where the idea that the people who were born in our new digital world are natives, and those of us who were born before are somehow immigrants to their world. It's not that there's nothing there, but it's a very problematic concept in the way that we think about other people. And I think that's one of the neat things about looking instead at this idea that there are multiple virtual arenas out there. There are a wide variety of digital skills, and you may be more of a resident in some of those places and more of a visitor in others. And honestly, there's a whole chunk of this map that we're not even looking at. That's the stuff I don't even do and may not even know is a thing. But I don't know how we map things we don't know exist, so we'll stick with things that we know about.
So one of the things that I really appreciate about the visitor and resident mapping, which I think has its own problems as well, I've seen criticisms of it, it's not perfect, but what I appreciate about it is that it really focuses on drawing out and having an individual draw out in a very visual way the way that they use the internet specifically. I think for one thing, it focuses in on a particular technology or a particular realm, right? A particular realm of technologies, which are like social media technologies or technologies that are enabled by the internet. Not necessarily just social media, because we talk about email, we talk about other things that are maybe not so social media. But it really, I think, draws out and brings to light the fact that you're more comfortable with the things you use more often, right? And young people might be more comfortable with certain technologies because they use them more often, but it's not because they're younger. It's because they use them more often. And I think that that is just such an important point, because I do think it is highly problematic and does damage in two different ways, this myth of the digital native. On one end, if you are a faculty member who's looking to work with technology or teach with technology, I think that this can be very disempowering to think that, oh, well, because of my age, I'm disadvantaged in this way. It's much more empowering to think, well, maybe I don't know how to use this stuff because I don't use it very often, but if I started using it more frequently, I would gain those skills. And also, I think it does damage when we walk into classrooms and we assume that all students have these skills. It's just not true. If you come from a certain background and you don't have access, or if you maybe have access but you have other interests, or there's just something in your family that points you in a different direction, and you don't have the practice in using those kind of technologies, you're at a different place. And when we make assumptions about our students, that can be very damaging in lots of different ways.
And, this is one of the things that we're on with DigPINS. Just personally, this is your opportunity to take a couple of weeks and choose. We've chosen some tools for you. We also want you to choose some tools on your own and say, I've got an excuse now. I've got a group of people who are interested, because we really are interested in what your experience is. And you can say, all right, I tried it out. It might fit this part of my life. It might not fit over that part of my life. It might work with these people and not those people. I might love it and want to use it all the time. I might hate it and never want to talk about it again. And those are all valid reactions as long as you take some time to play and find out.
So I'm really looking forward to everybody doing the visitor and resident mapping. Once you do your map, I would suggest that you do it on paper or you do it on a whiteboard. If you want to do it digitally, if you have like an iPad, you're basically going to be doing a matrix, a 2x2, 4x4, I forget what they call it, but matrix, and mapping out how you use different technologies. There's reading and 2 short videos that go along with that that'll show you how to do it. If you do it on paper, I would suggest you take a picture of it and then either post it in our private area. If you're at SNC, that would be Slack. If you're at Kenyon, that would be Moodle. But if you're up and running on Twitter and you want to use our hashtag DigPINS to share your VNR map, that would be great too. The other thing is, once we get our synchronous call together, bring your VNR map to that, because I think that'll help us to get to know one another.
Great. So did we want to talk a little bit about some of these identity issues as we start thinking about putting your map of where you are online out in a tweet or in a blog post?
Yeah, so I think there's the context of your digital identity, but then there's the content of your digital identity as well. And the content of your digital identity might be you as a professional, it might be you as a person, but you could also create either a pseudonym or have something that's more like a collective. So like we have I'm in the academic technology department, but I'm part of a larger a division called ITS, Information Technology Services. And Information Technology Services has its own Twitter account. That's not a person, but I would still say that it has a digital identity.
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right.
you might want to think about what kind of digital identity it is you're trying to craft. Are you trying to craft an identity around an office or around yourself as a professional or yourself as a scholar? And how do you think that's going to look as you sort of go forward? Um, from a personal perspective, one little side note I wanted to throw out there is just the some of the complications that can come around naming. So I'm lucky in one sense that I have a pretty unique name. There's not too many Autumn Keyneses out there. And I actually have a really unique spelling to my name. So in case you haven't noticed, I actually spell my name with two M's. So I spell it Autumm, which is on one hand really great. Like, I mean, that's what you want is a unique name on the internet so that people can find you, right? The problem is most people don't know how to spell it. And so they end up misspelling it. And so sometimes they don't find some of the things that I put out there because of that issue. For my blog, I own autummkeynes.com. And just to kind of cover that, I actually purchased Autumn with an N, Keynes.com. So I have AUTUMM Keynes.com and AUTUMN Keynes.com as well. And they both point to the same place. But you might want to think about if you have spelling nuances or how unique your name or how common your name is, because there can be some complications or some interesting things that go on with that as well.
And that would be the story of my name, Joe Murphy. Lots of Joe Murphys on the internet. So, for example, when I publish professionally, I make sure that I say Joseph M. Murphy because I want to make, which actually is also not unique. I've discovered in doing some citation searches, but at least it's more unique. It boils down to specifically who I am. When I signed up for a Twitter account, which probably it might have been more than 10 years ago, all the other Joe Murphys had been taken, and I didn't particularly want to be Joe Murphy 456 or whatever, so that's how I ended up with Joe from Kenyon. Here's where you get into, am I findable? Am I findable from my work? If you Google Joe Murphy, the first two hits I get tend to be an NHL player. I can't even ice skate, and a kind of a new agey thinker, which is fine. Those are other people who are doing their own thing. But I think this is where you get this other interesting question of how do I make sure that I'm not confused with someone else? And how do I make sure that the work that I am doing and I am proud of is out there and findable by the people that I want to find me?
And I think that brings us to an interesting place in talking about we do a digital identity first because I think that it's important to know who you are before you start interacting with others. But I think we also do it first because you never really stop talking about digital identity. So next week, we're going to start talking about networks and networking. But as you start networking in different groups, you will find that those networks also impact your digital identity and begin to shape you. Just like I think your in the flesh identity is impacted and changed by who you surround yourself with. But there is something interesting in terms of digital identity in that the context is not always apparent. It's not always clear who the audience is. So you write for a particular audience, but the real audience is anybody with an internet connection who happens upon your post or your tweet or whatever the case might be. And Joe, you had a really interesting story about a bit of context collapse. Could you share that?
Sure. So in 2004, Gambier, Ohio had the longest voting line in the nation. A couple of our machines broke. There was a huge turnout by the Kenyon College student that the Board of Elections didn't really maybe adequately prepared for if the machines didn't break, but certainly didn't adequately prepare for given that they did. Our polls actually closed after Hawaii's. So I stood in that line and I said, that was a neat thing. I bet my friends would like to know about it. My friends were saying what happened. So I had a blog, I got on, and I wrote the Gambier voting diary as this little kind of, not literally hour by hour, but kind of time-stamped record of here's what my day was like. starting with the moment when I drove by, saw a small line, said, oh, that'll go down by noon, I'll vote later. God laughs when you make plans. So I wrote this neat little thing. I sent it out. I told my friends about it. And then a couple of days later, one of our faculty members ran into me on Middle Path and said, are you the guy who wrote that blog? And it was this real visceral reaction of, hey man, you wrote that on the big internet. Fortunately, it's something that I'm actually kind of proud of. But it was a real clear moment when I became aware that while I had been imagining an audience that was mostly my friends, I had also written a historical document. I had also written a document about this community that I'm in and part of. And I'd also written a piece of creative nonfiction that a faculty member had found and said, this is actually valuable. I'm going to share it with my class because you did something that's in the area that I teach. So it was, I would say it was generally a positive story, but actually in the particular moment, are you the guy that wrote that blog? That was actually not a positive emotional reaction. It was very much the, what, how did this happen? So I guess that's just something to be aware of, that those contexts do collapse, that people can see some of these things when they're Googling stuff that happened to them, stuff that, that they're in some way interested in. And by and large, my experience with that has been more positive than negative, but it can go either way.
It can go either way. And I do think we need to make a point that you need to be careful, especially if you have an identity that is a person of a vulnerable population. You have to be really, really careful about what you put out there. But I do think there are real opportunities for positive connection and for connections that empower and enhance across distances in ways that can be really, really powerful. So we're going to talk more about it as we go along. Do we have anything else? I mean, I definitely want to end on a note of how people can get a hold of us, but do we have any final thoughts?
I think that was our list.
Okay. So you've actually moved locations.
I have. We are now on the second floor of Edward's house. Please come talk, because I would much rather talk to you than unpack. I have boxes. If you need boxes, I have boxes. You may have them. But we're on the second floor of Edward's house now, since the library at Kenyon is closed for the construction project of the new library.
Okay, and of course, digital ways that people can reach out to us. You're mostly using email and Moodle?
Yep, email, Moodle. If you've signed up for your Twitter account, you can catch me at Joe from Kenyon. Yeah, but we've got the Moodle account and my email address, murphyjm@kenyon.edu. Drop me a line.
And a little note about my first week of DigPINS, I'm actually going to be working remotely from Michigan. I'm taking care of some business that I need to take care of down there. I'm originally from Michigan. I have a lot of family there. If you're on campus and you're looking for help, you can still come by. My whole team will be here, and the ITS help desk team is here too. If you're struggling with some of the technology and you need some help getting signed up, of course, you can always drop me an email. I'm going to try to push everybody to Slack as much as possible and try to get off of email. So please make sure that you're signed up for email you're signed up for Slack, and contact me there. And then, of course, on Twitter on our hashtag DigPINS or Autumn with 2 N's, because Autumn with an N will not answer you. That's one thing I don't have. I don't have Autumn with an N on Twitter. So, all right. Well, thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Autumn. We'll see everybody in the synchronous calls. And so fill out the doodle poll so we can tell you when those will be.
Looking forward to it.
All right. See ya. Bye.